The ripple effect from what is happening in Israel-Palestine affects Europe and the United States to a far greater degree than other parts of the world. All right, the Near East also, Iran, Iraq, some of the Near Eastern countries. But here in the United States, it didn't take very long for it to happen. On Saturday, it happened in Chicago suburb. A man who probably considers himself to be a Christian, Joseph Zuba, C-Z-U-B-A, Joseph Zuba, 71 years old, decided that the way he would voice his feelings about what is happening in the Middle East would be to fatally stab a 6-year-old boy and seriously wound the boy's mother because they're Muslim. And this attack, this murder, according to the police who arrested this person, and listen to what he had to say, he murdered a child and tried to murder a mother because he was trying to voice his support for the Israelis who were butchered by Hamas. I can say without reservation or hesitation that there would not be a single adult person in any kibbutz in Israel who would say to this man, "Well done, sir. Well done. Thank you for murdering a 6-year-old boy on our behalf. Thank you, sir. Well done." No, it would not happen. Now, this murder of this child and the attempted murder of his mother has caused Muslim leaders in this country to ask American politicians and journalists to more fully reflect the humanity of Palestinian people. Yeah, they're human. As reports come out about this conflict, this horror. It's not a conflict. It's not a war. It's a horror. A Democratic Illinois state representative, Abdel Nasser Rashid, who is Palestinian American, pointed out the obvious. He said, quote, "This was directly connected to dehumanizing of Palestinians." Yes, it was. Now, the investigators in this town, this county, just a little bit southwest of Chicago, described a gory scene. You may not want to hear this. The investigators said the 71-year-old landlord turned on the boy and his mother, who were his tenants, at their home on Saturday morning, stabbing them repeatedly with a serrated knife that had a 7-inch blade. The boy, who family members identified as Wadia Al-Fayoum, the boy, 6 years old, was stabbed 26 times, pronounced dead at a hospital, according to the sheriff's office. The boy's mother was in serious condition after being stabbed more than a dozen times. Officials said the mother ran into a bathroom with her child and continued fighting off the attacker as she dialed 911. The now dead 6-year-old and his mother have been identified by relatives as Palestinian American. The sheriff's office in this particular county said in a statement yesterday, quote, detectives were able to determine that both victims in this brutal attack were targeted by the suspect due to them being Muslim and the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict involving Hamas and the Israelis, end quote. The murderer, the man who decided that the way to show his sympathy for the Israelis was to murder a 6-year-old and try to murder his wife, the 6-year-old's mother. This man is being held on charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of a hate crime, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. How do you process that? You can't. You cannot, unless you are a sick son of a bitch like some of these maggot bastards. You can't process that. You can't read that or hear about it and work it through your consciousness. As in my case, you're reading the words. Your case, you're hearing them. Maybe you've already read this. It was in the New York Times. Or maybe you saw a video report from the police in Will County, Illinois. You can't process that. You can't do it. Do you know what happens with that information? Do you know what happens with the information that is filtered into your head when you see dead bodies of children on the streets of a kibbutz in Israel? When you see bloodied and dead children being brought into a hospital in Gaza, and when there's no room, their little corpses being put into a fucking ice cream truck. Do you know what happens in your mind? You don't process that. It sits there, and it will sit there forever. Oh, you may be able to think about other things, but the knowledge of this will never go away. Suburban Chicago has a large Palestinian American community. I used to live there. Well, I lived in Rogers Park, which is a suburb. Not a suburb, a neighborhood in Chicago. And the area where this child was murdered and his wife, I'm sorry, I keep saying wife, his mother was almost murdered, includes an area with Arab restaurants and shops. And it used to be called, Chicago is known as a city of neighborhoods. This was referred to as Little Palestine. And the attack happened in a home along a busy stretch of highway near a Chevrolet dealership and a barbecue restaurant, about 40 miles southwest of downtown Chicago. Do you want some more description? Well, that neighborhood was adorned with several American flags. There was an advertisement out for organic honey and a sign asking people to pray to end abortion. And we have an eyewitness, not of the stabbing and the murder, but her name is Mariola Jagodzinski. She lives 2 houses away from this horror. She said she had never had any negative interactions with the man who did the murder. She said she had given toys to the mother of Wadia, the 6-year-old. And she said she was speechless and distressed and didn't know what to do when she heard about the killing. This is Jagodzinski said, quote, he was a playful child, really full of energy. Kids are innocent. This really destroys so many hearts, end quote. And yesterday, the Chicago office of CAIR, C-A-I-R, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Chicago office, said the stabbing was, quote, our worst nightmare, end quote. The executive director of CARE Chicago, Ahmed Rehab, said, quote, our hearts are heavy and our prayers are with the darling boy and his mother, end quote. The authorities did not confirm the names of either victim. The Illinois State Police said in a statement that was released to the media that it was coordinating with other agencies, quote, in response to the elevated level of threats of violence and hate crimes related to the current conflict, end quote. The state police director, Brendan Kelly, said, quote, everyone in Illinois, both law enforcement and community members alike, must remain on guard against both terrorism and hate crimes during this period of volatility, end quote. The governor of the state, who happens to be a Jew, J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, said in a statement that to take a 6-year-old's life in the name of bigotry is nothing short of evil. Governor Pritzker added, Wadia should be heading to school in the morning. Instead, his parents will wake up without their son, end quote. And that is, of course, assuming the mother will wake up from her stab wounds. President Biden said last night that he was shocked and sickened by the attack. He added this, quote, the child's Palestinian Muslim family came to America seeking what we all seek, a refuge to live, learn, and pray in peace. This horrific act of hate has no place in America and stands against our fundamental values, which are freedom from fear for how we pray, what we believe, and who we are, end quote. President Biden, would that that were all true. Would that that were all true. But here in the second decade of the 21st century, it is not true. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.